With so much happening in our world right now between pandemics, presidential elections, vaccines coming in, and so many changes going on, it's super important to understand exactly what the market's doing so that you can understand what the best decision is for you. With so many things happening in our world right now between pandemics, lockdowns, vaccines, presidential elections, and everything else, it's very important that you stay informed. So this video, I'm gonna give you 3 things to understand for the market coming up. First thing we need to talk about is unemployment. Now, obviously a ton of people have been affected by unemployment while a big group hasn't. Regardless, everyone could be affected by the unemployment situation in our country because there's so many people that can't currently make their mortgage payments. The government stepped in and mortgage companies are doing what's called forbearance, basically pushing pause on those mortgage payments. Eventually though, people are gonna have to start making their payments again because obviously that will affect the banks pretty dramatically if they're not getting paid. So what we're looking at is how is that reopening gonna happen? How are they gonna start allowing forbearances again in a way that doesn't crash the economy, but also enables people to get paid, but they could also get forced to sell their house. Now, here's what we're talking about. If people don't have a job, can't make their payments, but then all of a sudden it becomes required that they do start making those payments again, we could see a bunch of people that then go to sell their house without buying, so that can kind of flip-flop the market as we see it currently. Second thing let's talk about is interest rates. Now we've seen all through the last year or two really low interest rates, typically below 3%. Forecasting for the next year in 2021, we're not actually anticipating that to change very much. Everything that I'm seeing, it sounds like we're gonna have pretty consistent rates that are gonna be quite low again, around or under 3% right now. The long-term national average is 8%, you gotta understand. So we're still way below the average historically, and we're not really expecting that to change. What that will mean is buyers are then able to still compete for those properties because their payment stays the same even though they're pushing up that purchase price dollar. Helps for sellers and it does help for buyers to be able to kind of grease those wheels and keep the economy moving. Third I'm gonna hit you with is, let's talk about month supply of inventory. That's really kind of the boring way of saying, are we in a buyer's market or are we in a seller's market? Is the market more favorable for one or the other? And we've been in a seller's market for quite some time, as I'm sure you've heard me talking about. And we've also been expecting that change to be happening regardless of pandemic and all the other things going on currently. You know, typically about every 7 years or so, we expect it to shift back and forth from a buyer's to a seller's. It doesn't stay balanced for very long. We usually go to one side for a little while and then swing back about every 7 years. Currently, you know, in the Twin Cities, we're right around that 8-year mark, so we should have already seen that happening. Nationally, I understand it's a little bit longer than that, more towards 10 years. That we've been in a seller's market. Regardless of everything going on, we did need to see that turning and we expect to see it anyways. Now, then you add in COVID and everything else going on, forbearance and that, I think that's going to force us into shifting our market very quickly. Again, to reference my first point, and I'll kind of just hit you with the bottom line now, if we have an influx of listings from people that are forced to sell, then that's going to cause a bunch more sellers in the market without bringing the buyers with it. So while we currently have the opposite problem, that could shift our market pretty dramatically, pretty quickly within, say, the next year or so. So specifically, how is that going to affect our buyers? Obviously, buyers will have more to choose from. They won't have to act as quickly. And instead of buyers having to compete in multiple offers every single time and going well over list, it'll actually mean the opposite. So then for our sellers will have to compete by lowering their price so that they're at least slightly better price than the neighbor, or improving their value so they either have a nicer home or a better price than the other homes around them. The biggest thing I think is gonna affect is really in people's mindset to shift fairly quickly. From what you've seen is, you know, your neighbor sells their house, they get multiple offers, tons of showings, and boom, you know, it's sold the first weekend, which is a very common scenario, to all of a sudden it will shift to 2-3 months on the market, a few showings here and there. We're expecting a good number of buyers, but they'll have a lot more options. They can be a lot more picky. They'll be negotiating prices down much more than negotiating prices up, or just having it sell at about what we list the home at. Even more so for sellers, they're going to have to get used to, you know, there's been some kind of a mindset I've seen with sellers of either, maybe I could just sell the house myself, or frankly, it's gonna sell so fast, I'll just find the cheapest agent and they'll just get it sold. Which is completely valid in a way for the market that we've been at. But then all of a sudden, when a lot of people are forced to sell, they have to sell, or they're getting foreclosed on and they need it sold quickly, then they watch their neighbor whose house sat on the market for 3 months average. I think the conversation is gonna shift a lot more towards which agent specifically has the best marketing plan, who's definitely gonna be able to get it sold, even when the market is not favorable for those sellers. And that motivation to have to sell is so much higher. So sellers are gonna have to shift their mindset to truly getting the best marketing plan possible versus just a quick, easy sell that they expect it'll more or less sell itself. And so that's what I anticipate shifting, which will be the biggest shift for 2021. So is the market gonna crash? Nothing I'm seeing says that we will. We're still expected to have great interest rates. We're still expected to have plenty of homes to sell, and even more, we're still expecting people will be buying as things continue to open up, more people get back to work, and everything starts to get going again. So I think you're gonna be in a great position. Of course, you need to hire a professional that'll get the job done very well and will help coach you through the changes that are happening in this coming year. So make sure you've subscribed to my page down below and click that little bell so you get notified. I'm also gonna be doing a video in the near future specifically for those that are worried about foreclosure and what steps you can take to avoid that. I'll also give you a link to a playlist right here so you can get more videos just like this if you're thinking about buying a home in 2021.